The tall, glassy building of France's Foreign Intelligence Service, DGSE, stood sleek and imposing against the Paris skyline. Inside one of the soundproof rooms, Jean Carvier sat quietly across from Colonel Maurice Leblanc, his handler. "Do you get how important this mission is, Jean?" Leblanc asked, calm but firm. Burkina Faso might seem like just another small country, but Trayor, the new leader there, is gaining serious influence. His push for controlling their own resources is catching on, and that's a problem for us. Jean nodded, confident. "I've looked into their systems. They're outdated. I could take over their networks in a matter of weeks." LeBlanc slid a folder to him. "Your cover's solid. You're an MIT grad, a digital infrastructure expert. Trayor's desperate to modernize, so you're exactly what he needs." Jean flipped through the fake identity papers. "And the extraction plan?" LeBlanc's face hardened a bit. "Standard stuff. But don't forget, this isn't just spying. We want full control, military comms, government emails, and most importantly, that new mineral resource database." 3 weeks later, Jean wandered through the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. The difference from Paris was striking. Unpaved roads, poverty everywhere. Yet there was something else in the air. Hope. People moved with purpose. Vendors shouted their greetings with energy. His local contact told him, "Trayor has given the people hope. That's what makes him dangerous to your folks." Jean said nothing, focusing on the mission. At the newly created Digital Transformation Agency, his interview surprised him with its rigor. The director, Fatima Ouedraogo, a sharp-eyed woman, asked him straight, "Why would an MIT graduate come work in one of the poorest countries on earth?" Jean delivered the line he'd rehearsed. "I believe digital equality is the great equalizer of our time. Everyone deserves access to technology's benefits." Fatima studied him for a beat, then nodded. "President Trayor will want to meet you himself. He takes a personal interest in digital sovereignty." That evening, back in his modest hotel room, Jean set up a secure connection to Paris. "I'm in." Interview went well. Waiting to meet Trayor. LeBlanc's reply came instantly. "Good. Remember, we need full access. The resource management system is top priority. The Chinese are already circling with offers." Jean stared out at the Ouagadougou night and felt something was different here. Not what he'd been told. His first meeting with Ibrahim Trayor was nothing like Jean expected. No grand palace, no heavy security detail. Just a simple office where Trayor, in military fatigues, was working late. "Mr. Carvier," Trayor greeted him, standing to shake his hand firmly. "Your credentials are impressive, but why Burkina Faso? We can't pay you like Western companies do." Jean gave his practiced answer about digital equality, but Trayor's gaze was sharp, as if seeing right through him. "Admirable," Trayor said finally. "But here, ideals aren't enough. We need results." He walked over to a map of Burkina Faso on the wall. "This country has been exploited for centuries. Our gold, manganese, now lithium, all taken while our people stay poor." Turning back to Jean, Trayor said, "Technology can be a tool for liberation or just another way to colonize. Which will it be for us, Mr. Carvier?" The question hung between them. Jean answered honestly, almost without thinking, "That depends on who controls it." Trayor smiled, the first real smile Jean had seen from him. "Exactly. You start tomorrow." As Jean left, Trayor added quietly, "Many experts from the West come here. They take what they want and leave. I hope you'll be different." Days passed, and Jean found himself with more access than he could have imagined. He worked side by side with Fatima, helping build Burkina Faso's first sovereign digital identity system, securing government communications, and creating a blockchain-based platform to track mineral resources transparently. Every night, like clockwork, he sent back everything he discovered, planting backdoors, mapping out the networks for Paris. But something inside him started to shift. He saw Trayor working late into the night, not for personal gain, but truly for his people. He watched kids in remote villages access educational content for the first time through digital hubs Jean helped set up. He saw how the resource tracking system finally brought transparency to mining operations, making sure profits reached the citizens instead of disappearing into the pockets of outsiders. The story Paris had told him, the one that made Trayor out to be a threat, began to feel like a lie. One evening, Jean was working late when he overheard Trayor on a tense call. "No, Minister Dupont. These terms won't do," Trayor said firmly. On the other end, the French foreign minister was pressuring him. "Your digital sovereignty project worries our investors. Maybe you should reconsider, or we might rethink our support." Trayor's reply was calm, but unyielding. "We both know what support has meant for countries like mine in the past. Those days are over." After hanging up, Trayor stood by the window, deep in thought. "Trouble with negotiations, Mr. Carvier?" Jean asked cautiously. Trayor turned and looked at him. "When your country was occupied during World War II, what did the French call those who worked with the occupiers?" Jean felt a lump in his throat. "Collaborators," he whispered. And those who resisted? Heroes. Trayor nodded slowly, almost to himself. That night, Jean lay awake, restless. He accessed DGSE's secure server using emergency protocols and dug deeper than he was allowed. What he found shocked him. Operation Eagle's Claw. A sweeping plan, not just for Burkina Faso, but several African nations, to control them digitally. Backdoors in infrastructure, surveillance setups, and economic espionage. His mission was just a small piece of a much bigger, darker puzzle. The next day, a message came from Colonel LeBlanc. Phase 2 approved. Implement Eagle's Talon. We need full control before the Chinese delegation arrives next week. Jean swallowed hard. Eagle's Talon was the harshest cyber attack protocol, designed to seize total control, shut down communications, manipulate resource data, and even interfere with the military. It would make Burkina Faso's digital sovereignty a complete illusion. That night, Jean sat in his apartment, facing a choice that felt like a knife to his soul. On one side of his screen, the DGSE's Eagle's Talon, ready to launch. On the other, the full truth. Conversations, plans, betrayals, everything he'd uncovered. His finger hovered. Training screamed at him, follow orders. Something deeper whispered, choose differently. Under the cover of night, Jean arrived at the presidential compound. The guard raised an eyebrow. Mr. Carvier, the president isn't here. He's at the hospital visiting wounded soldiers. Jean nodded. I need to leave something on his desk. It's urgent. Alone in Trayor's office, Jean placed a small flash drive on the desk next to a handwritten note. The truth about Operation Eagle's Claw. I was sent to betray you. I chose not to. Jean Carvier. By dawn, Jean had erased all traces linking him to DGSE and was ready for whatever would come next. He knew the rules. He'd be branded a traitor, hunted by his own agency. But as the sun rose over Ouagadougou, he felt strangely calm. A knock came sooner than expected. Presidential security. Jean braced himself, but instead of handcuffs, he heard, President Trayor requests your presence immediately. At the presidential office, Jean found Trayor, Fatima, and several military officers waiting. The flash drive sat on the desk between them. Trayor's expression was unreadable. Mr. Carvier, or whatever your real name is, explain this. Jean took a deep breath and told them everything. His recruitment, his mission, the massive Operation Eagle's Claw. Silence followed. Jean waited for the verdict. Execution, prison, or worse. Finally, Trayor broke the silence. Why? Why betray your own country for hours? Jean met his gaze. Because what I saw here is nothing like what I was told. You aren't a threat to France. You're a threat to exploitation. There's a big difference. Trayor studied him for what felt like forever, then motioned for the others to leave. Alone with Trayor, Jean waited. You realize I could have you killed as a spy? Jean nodded. I know. Trayor turned to the window, looking out over his waking city. But if I did, I'd be exactly what they say I am. He turned back, eyes sharp. I believe people can change, Mr. Carvier. Even spies. Even countries. Picking up the flash drive, he said, this information is valuable, yes, but more valuable is what we do with it. Jean looked puzzled. Trayor smiled faintly. I'm offering you a real choice. Not the illusion your superiors gave you. Help us build true digital sovereignty, not for me, but for the people of Burkina Faso. Back in Paris, Colonel LeBlanc stared at his screen in disbelief. All communications with the Burkina Faso operation had gone completely dark. Find him, he ordered sharply. Whatever it takes. His deputy hesitated. Sir, there's something else. A file was sent to journalists at Le Monde. Operation Eagle's Claw. Everything, including Carvier's testimony. LeBlanc's face went pale. Contain it. But it's already too late. 1 week later, Trayor addressed the nation. People of Burkina Faso, an attempt was made to undermine our independence. Not with guns, but with lines of code. He gestured to Jean, standing beside him. This man was sent to enslave us digitally. Instead, he chose truth. Together, we've secured our systems and built a blueprint for digital sovereignty. One we will share with every African nation. Internationally, France denied all allegations, calling Jean disturbed and his claims fabricated. But the evidence was undeniable. Other African countries began inspecting their digital systems and found similar backdoors. A movement for digital sovereignty was spreading across the continent. European parliaments started asking tough questions about this new form of colonization. 6 months later, Jean, now officially a Burkinabe citizen, sat in his office at the Ministry of Digital Transformation. On his desk was a framed quote from Trayor. True sovereignty in the 21st century begins with who controls your data. His phone buzzed with a message from Fatima. Security alert. French diplomatic delegation arriving tomorrow, requesting to reset relations. Jean smiled. The power dynamics had shifted, not with force but with truth. Walking home through familiar streets, children called his name. A local paper's headline caught his eye. Burkina Faso launches Africa's first sovereign digital currency. The photo showed Trayor demonstrating the system to other African leaders. Jean had helped build it, this time with no backdoors, no secret surveillance. That evening, Trayor came to visit Jean. No security detail, no ceremony. They sat on Jean's small balcony overlooking the city. You know they'll never stop trying, Jean said quietly. Trayor nodded. Power never surrenders willingly. He looked out at the city lights blinking on across Ouagadougou. But now we're ready. And more importantly, now we know. Jean met his gaze. It was worth it, he said. Whatever comes next, it was worth it. 2 years later, at a UN Digital Rights Conference, Burkina Faso presented its digital sovereignty framework, already adopted by 23 African nations. The presenter wasn't Trayor or Jean. It was Fatima Ouedraogo, now Minister of Digital Transformation. She declared, Africa's resources have been plundered for centuries. But data is the new gold, and this time we control it. French officials in the audience shifted uncomfortably. After the conference, African representatives gathered in a secure room. Jean presented plans for a Pan-African secure communications network. With this, he explained, African nations can share intelligence, trade data, and coordinate policies, free from foreign surveillance. A Nigerian minister raised an eyebrow. And we should trust you? A former French spy, Trayor answered firmly. We trust actions, not backgrounds. Mr. Carvier chose truth when hiding it would have been easier. The final scene unfolded in Paris. Protesters gathered outside DDSC headquarters, signs reading, no more digital colonization. Operation Eagle's Claw, never again. Inside, Colonel LeBlanc packed up his office, a scapegoat for a failed mission. On his desk, a newspaper showed Trayor shaking hands with the French president, signing a new digital equality agreement. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, stood Jean Carvier, the man who chose conscience over country, truth over orders. And so, history would remember. It wasn't armies or money that broke the chains of modern colonialism. It was one act of courage, when a young engineer pulled back the curtain on digital colonization, showing the world that in the digital age, true independence starts with who controls your data. For Ibrahim Trayor, it confirmed what he'd always believed, that even in the darkest power systems, conscience can still win. And for Jean Carvier, the spy who chose humanity over nationalism, it proves sometimes the greatest patriotism is the courage to say no. That wraps up the paraphrased full story. Let me know if you want me to polish or just anything else. This story shows how one person's choice can change everything, especially when it comes to who controls our digital world. Like, subscribe, and comment below. What would you do if you were in Jean's shoes?